Welcome to AmeenAcademy.com. Let us do history of the Roman world. In that, we'll discuss about fall of Roman Empire. Throughout the 5th century, the empire's territories in Western Europe and Northwestern Africa, including Italy, fell to various invading or indigenous people in what is sometimes called the migration period. By the late 3rd century, the city of Rome no longer served as an effective capital for the emperor, and various cities were used as new administrative capitals. Successive emperors, starting with Constantine, privileged the eastern city of Byzantium, which he had entirely rebuilt after a siege. In 476, after being refused lands in Italy, Odoacer and his Germanic mercenaries took Ravenna, the Western Roman capital at the time, and deposed Western Emperor Romulus Augustus. The whole of Italy was quickly conquered, and Odoacer's rule became recognized in the Eastern Empire. Four broad schools of thought exist on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire: decay owing to general malaise, monarchical decay, catastrophic collapse, and transformation. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was the process of decline during which the empire failed to enforce its rule, and its vast territory was divided into several successor polities. The Roman Empire lost the strength and that had allowed it to exercise effective control. Modern historians mention factors including the effectiveness and numbers of the army, the health and numbers of the Roman population, the strength of the economy, the competence of the emperor, the religious changes of the period, and the efficiency of the civil administration. Increasing pressure from barbarians outside Roman culture and contributed greatly to the collapse. The reason for the collapse are major subjects of the historiography of the ancient world, and they inform much modern discourse on state failure. Now we'll discuss further about fall of Roman Empire. The Roman Empire fell in stages, with the Western Roman Empire ending in 476 AD and the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, ending in 1453 AD. The Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD and the German warlord Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus. The empire's vast territory was divided among several successor polities. The Eastern Roman Empire, which was richer and stronger than the West, survived until 1453 AD, when the Ottoman Turks conquered its capital city, Constantinople. Constantinople is present-day Istanbul in Turkey. The Roman Empire declined for centuries due to a number of factors, including internal corruption, invasions by Germanic tribes such as the Vandals and the Ostrogoths, the division of the Roman Empire by the Emperor Diocletian, the moving of the capital to Constantinople by the Emperor Constantine, the army's decay, which was due to lack of wars, incompetent leaders, and unfair distribution of rewards. Now, some more important reasons. We'll discuss why the Roman Empire fell. The invasion by tribes. The most straightforward theory of the Western Rome's collapse pins the fall on a string of military losses sustained against outside forces. Rome had tangled with Germanic tribes for centuries, but by the 300s, barbarian groups like the Goths and encroached beyond the empire's borders. The Romans weathered a Germanic uprising in the late 4th century, but in 410, the Visigoth king Alaric successfully sacked the city of Rome. The empire spent the next several decades under constant threat before the Eternal City was raided again in 455, this time by the Vandals. Finally, in 476, the Germanic leader Odoacer staged a revolt and deposed Emperor Romulus Augustulus. From then on, no Roman emperor would ever again rule from the post in Italy, leading many to cite 476 as the year of the Western Empire suffered its death blow. The economic troubles and over reliance on slave labor. Even as Rome was under attack from the outside forces, it was also crumbling from within thanks to a severe financial crisis, constant wars and overspending, and had significantly lightened imperial coffers and oppressed taxation and inflation and had widened the gap between rich and poor. In the hope of avoiding the taxman, many members of the wealthy classes had even fled to the countryside and set up independent fire freedoms. At the same time, the empire was rocked by a labor deficit. Rome's economy depended on slaves to still its field and work as craftsmen, and its military might had traditionally provided a fresh influx of conquered peoples to put to work. But when expansion ground to a halt in the 2nd century, Rome's supply of slaves and other war treasures began to dry up. A further blow came in the 5th century when the Vandals climbed North Africa and began disrupting the empire's trade by prowling the Mediterranean as pirates. With its economy faltering and its commercial and agricultural production in decline, the empire began to close its grip on Europe. The rise of Eastern Empire. The fate of Western Rome was partially sealed in the late 3rd century when the Emperor Diocletian divided the empire into two halves, the Western Europe, seated in the city of Milan, and the Eastern Empire in Byzantium, later known as Constantinople. The division made the empire more easily governable in the short term, but over time, the two halves drifted apart. East and West failed to adequately work together to combat outside threats, and the two often squabbled over resources and military aid. As the Gulf widened, the largely Greek speaking Eastern Empire grew in wealth, while the Latin speaking West descended into an economic crisis. Most importantly, the strength of the Western Eastern Empire served to divert barbarian invasion to the West. Emperors like Constantine ensured that the city of Constantinople was fortified and well guarded, but Italy and the city of Rome, which only had symbolic value for many in the East, were left vulnerable. The Western political structure would finally disintegrate in the 5th century, but the Eastern Empire endured in some form of another 1,000 years before being overwhelmed by the Ottoman Empire in the 1400s. Overexpansion and military overspending. At its height, the Roman Empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Euphrates River in the Middle East, but its grandeur may have also been its downfall. With such a vast territory to govern, the empire faced an administrative and logistical nightmare. Even with their excellent road system, the Romans were unable to communicate quickly or effectively enough to manage their holdings. Rome struggled to marshal enough troops and resources to defend its frontiers from local rebellions and outside attacks, and by the second century, the Emperor Hadrian was forced to build his famous wall in Britain just to keep the enemy at bay. As more and more funds were funneled into the military upkeep of the empire, technological advancement slowed and Rome's civil infrastructure fell into disrepair. Government corruption and political instability. If Rome's sheer size made it difficult to govern, ineffective and inconsistent leadership only served to magnify the problems. Being the Roman emperor had always been a particularly dangerous job, but during the tumultuous second and third centuries, it nearly became a death sentence. Civil war thrust the empire into chaos. The more than 20 men took the throne in the span of only 75 years. Usually, after the murder of their predecessors, the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguards, assassinated and installed new sovereigns at will, and once even auctionized the spot off to highest bidder. The political rot also extended to the Roman Senate, which failed to temper the excess of the emperor due to its own widespread corruption and incompetence. As the situation worsened, civic pride waned, and many Roman citizens lost trust in their leadership. The arrival of Huns and the migration of the barbarian tribes. The barbarian attacks on Rome partially stemmed from the mass migration caused by the Huns' invasion of Europe in the late 4th century. When these Eurasian warriors rampaged through northern Europe, they drove many Germanic tribes to the border of the Roman Empire. The Romans grudgingly allowed members of the Visigoth tribes to cross south of the Danube and into the safety of Roman territory, but they treated them with extreme cruelty. According to the historian Ammianus Marcellus, Roman officials even forced the starving Goths to trade their children into slavery in exchange for dog meat. In brutalized the Goths, the Roman created a dangerous enemy within their own borders. When the oppression became too much to bear, the Goths rose up the revolt and eventually routed a Roman army and killed the Eastern Emperor Valens during the Battle of Adrianople in AD 378. The shocked Romans negotiated the flimsy peace with the barbarians, but the truce unraveled in 410 when the Goth king Alaric moved west and sacked Rome. With the Western Empire weakened, Germanic tribes like the Vandals and the Saxons were able to surge across its borders and occupy Britain, Spain, and North Africa. The Christianity and loss of traditional values. The decline of Rome dovetailed with the spread of Christianity, and some have argued that the rise of a new faith helped contribute to the empire's fall. The Edict of Milan regalized Christianity in 313 and it later became the state religion in 380. These decrees ended centuries of persecution, but they may have also eroded the traditional Roman value system. The Christianity displaced the polytheistic Roman religion, which viewed the emperor as having a divine status and also shifted focus away from the glory of the state and onto a sole deity. Meanwhile, popes and other church leaders took an increased role in political affairs, further complicating governance. In 18th century historian Edward Gibbon was the most famous proponent of this theory, but his take has since been widely criticized. While the spread of Christianity may have played a small role in curbing Roman civic virtue, most scholars now argue that its influence paled in comparison to military, economic, and administrative factors. Next, weakening of the Roman legions. For the most for most of its history, Rome's military was the envy of the ancient world, but during the decline, the makeup of the once mighty legions began to change. Unable to recruit enough soldiers from the Roman citizenry, emperors like Diocletian and Constantine began hiring foreign mercenaries to prop up their armies. The ranks of the legions eventually swelled with the Germanic Goths and other barbarians so that Roman began using the Latin word barbarus in place of soldier. While these Germanic soldiers of fortune proved to be fierce warriors, they also had little or no loyalty to the empire, and their power hungry officers often turned against their Roman employers. In fact, many of the barbarians who sacked the city of Rome and brought down the Western Empire had earned their military stripes while serving in the Roman religions. So far, we discussed about fall of Roman somewhat detail. If you have done, please subscribe our YouTube channel.